Welcome to Corrective Consciousness episode 180, the podcast where we explore the inanity of pop culture. I'm your host, vysethebold, and this is
Lotus Prince.
And we have another great episode here for you. We are going to be talking about games that aged poorly. So in order for it to meet this category, I really don't want to go over games that were poor back in their day, but games that were pretty darn awesome for their day, and or pretty well received back in their day, and just have very little appeal now. It's very difficult to go back to them, or they've just been supplanted by something that totally blew it out of the water. To start this, I actually kind of wanted to talk about an entire genre I had in mind for this. Remember car combat games?
Well, like Twisted Metal? Or
That's exactly what I'm talking about, yes.
I mean, they came out with one for the PS3, right?
Yes. And clearly, and it wasn't that well received or well remembered. So, and when you go back to them, the Twisted Metal 1 and 2 were two of the hallmark games for PS1, but if you go back and you play them, they're kind of awkward and stiff, and also not a whole lot of fun to play when you go back to them. So it's actually kind of funny. Some of those, the original PlayStation was sold on Twisted Metal, and Crash Bandicoot. Those were the two biggest games when that system came out, and both of them are kind of relics of their time. They are not fun to go back to. You could still go back to any of the Mario games and any of them really, and they're still a lot of fun to play, and they have tons of appeal. But those games have barely any. One of the games that I really wanted when I first got my PS1 was back in 1997. Is I really wanted Twisted Metal 2. It was one of those things, and I wanted Twisted Metal 1 to go along with it, to check out the story, I guess. I wanted to know where Sweet Tooth came from, and it turns out they change it every single game. But I can't go back to those games. I remember playing them, and it turns out you have to do a lot of micro turning and things like that, and everybody takes a ton of damage. It's when you boil it down to it, it's kind of like an arena first person shooter, Quake 3 or something like that, but everybody's driving a car and it takes forever to kill everybody. Whereas something like Quake 3, everybody dies very quickly. So there's instant gratification. You could just shoot a couple rockets at somebody in Quake 3 and then they're dead. Even in GoldenEye or something like that, people don't live very long when you target them. But those games, it takes forever. Have you tried playing one of those games recently?
I don't know if I've tried playing them ever.
Yeah. I mean, the interesting thing about those games is they're twist endings for every character. I really like those things.
I've looked
at
a bunch of the ending movies.
Yeah, you can watch those supercut of those on YouTube, really, and that's the interesting part of those games. But nowadays, I think the gameplay has very little appeal. You never hear about anybody talking about any of them, except for maybe Twisted Metal Black was really big at its time. That was the return to form from after Twisted Metal 3 and 4 weren't very good, and then the one on PS3 is barely ever talked about, and nobody even talks about any of the imitators. There were tons of imitators. There was
Carmageddon.
Well, Carmageddon had a racing component, so you could go back to that, and that was okay. That also has the Death Race 2000 thing going for it as well. You get points for hitting pedestrians.
Sure.
But what else was back then? Vigilante
Cell
8.
Damage.
Cell Damage. Vigilante 8, 1 and 2. There was Star Wars Super Bombad Racing.
Well, that's in a class of its own.
was it there was a WWE one called like Crush Time or Crush Hour or something like that.
Sure.
There were a lot of licensed ones, like a ton of them, in fact. And that was like a genre of games, and you never see anything like that. You might see like a racing game with some combat mechanics, a
I
la
was
like
actually going to mention Mario Kart's battle
Mario
mode.
Kart. Yeah, Mario Kart was probably the closest thing, but it doesn't have the stiff gameplay as this, and Mario Kart 8's battle mode is a lot of fun. It's actually really good. But like part of the appeal, I think a lot of people don't realize is that like it was a 3D thing that was brand new. So like it was part of the possibilities of 3D, and it also had like a gritty atmosphere that a lot of like Nintendo games didn't have at the time. So it was kind of a palate cleanser. Plus, it had Red Book audio music and things like that. When Twisted Metal came out, so there was all like FMV movies. A lot of impressive stuff for the time. But it's just so freaking hard to go back to, and I've unless it's like heavily modified, I don't think we'll be seeing that genre in a successful franchise for many years, I think. What was going to be one of your choices there, Lotus?
Well, I don't like my answer is a little weird. It's less about games or series, and I think more about mechanics.
Okay.
Like there are things that maybe seem okay when you play game number 1 in the series, but once you play game number 3, going back to game number 1 can feel weird. For example, I mean, I love talking about the Yakuza games.
Sure.
But Yakuza 6 and Kiwami 2, except for like loading the game, there's almost no loading screens ever. The ability to go seamlessly into a building is just nuts. And when you go back to even Kiwami 1, it just feels so dated. Every time you enter a store, that you have to wait for loading. And if you go back to the PS2 games, they're on like fixed camera angles when you're in the city. It feels weird. There's like a problem with camera control. Like even Metal Gear Solid 2 regarding camera control, like one of my favorite games in the series, it feels a little weird to play now because you can't control the camera unless you're in first person. So you're like, what if I look past this area? Oh, I can't. It just feels strange. Or like Resident Evil. In Resident Evil 4, I was looking for the knife in the inventory, and then I realized, oh wait, no, you have a knife button on the controller. You could just swing the knife. How cool is that? And if you go back to any Resident Evil before that, even Remake and Zero, which were highly advanced Resident Evils for their time, you need to take up an inventory space with the knife if you want it. And it just feels like, oh man, like if you've played it, like again, you wouldn't think anything of it at the time, but once you play a newer game and then go back, it feels like, oh. And even Resident Evil 4, you can't move and shoot. You have to stop and go into aim mode, like GoldenEye and the N64, which itself feels super dated. But like I know GoldenEye 64 was like the reason to buy an N64 that back in the day.
It's
like
true.
I mean, Mario 64 really was, and Zelda, but like GoldenEye was nuts, dude.
That was the big multiplayer game for that system that like everybody played before Smash Brothers came along, which was relatively late in the system's lifespan, and even before Mario Kart. This was like the first big multiplayer game for that system.
And even when Smash Brothers came out, it felt like experimental.
Yeah, it wasn't well refined, and a lot of people didn't know what to think of it.
Yeah, like Pikachu could fight Link. Like, that's interesting,
Yeah.
But GoldenEye's controls, man, they did not age well. Like, I don't know what you could do better with the N64 controller, but going back, it feels so bizarre. Or,
actually, a lot of N64 games I could throw onto this list.
I know.
Honestly,
even comparing Resident Evil 1 to Resident Evil 1, like in Remake, if you have a grenade launcher with 3 grenade rounds, and you pick up an ammo pickup of 6 more of the same type of grenade rounds, if you combine it with what you have in the grenade launcher, it'll just fill it up some more. Now you have 9 grenade rounds in the grenade launcher. Freaking amazing. And if you want to switch out to acid rounds or napalm, do it. Whereas in RE1, I think you have to expend what is in your grenade launcher before you load another ammo type.
That's so stupid.
It's really annoying. Like, you can't stack like 1,000 grenades and
Yeah.
you got to expend all of that to switch to acid. Like you had an ammo cap,
Sure.
which on one hand made it more fair in that regard, but on the other hand, you have a fully loaded grenade launcher and the same ammo type, like pistol and pistol ammo, which was a little irritating. But the fact that you had to empty your grenade launcher before you could load something else, that sucked, man. Like, going back to Resident Evil 1 on PS1, it feels weird. Like, there are little things like that just, maybe you don't notice them at the time because it's the first game in the series, but when you evolve, going back definitely feels strange. Even in the Souls games. In Bloodborne, you want to climb a ladder fast? Do it.
Yeah.
In Dark Souls 2, you want to climb a ladder fast? Do it, but it'll cost you stamina. In Dark Souls, you want to climb a ladder fast? Nope. in Demon Souls, you want to descend a ladder fast? Nope. it's a pain in the ass. Like, do you want to run and jump? Sorry. Little things like that. You're like, oh, that's not even really a dated thing so much as it doesn't have something that. How did it not have that the first time?
Yeah. Here's another one. I mean, this is going back a ways, but I mean, just to show you how good its sequel was compared to like itself. It's very difficult to go back to Galaga, which is Namco's first shmup. It's hard to go back to Galaxian. I'm sorry. It's very hard to go back to Galaxian.
I was going to say, Galaga is pretty playable.
Galaga is one of the best games of all time. It is one of the most eminently playable games, and it will continue to be forever. I'm going to go ahead and say that it is... I mean, there are new versions of Galaga out in arcades right now. They just put out like one that you can find at Round 1 and Dave & Buster's. That's like a ticket game, but it's by and large it's just Galaga. That man is playing Galaga, but Galaga's amazing. It's a really, really, really good game, and it's an early game too. So you can't say, and it had sequels. Like there are many Galaga sequels, but the original Galaga actually stands above pretty much all the other ones. I mean, there's some really good sequels. Like I really love Galaga 89, which is really, really good game. But I mean, by and large, it's just Galaga but with more shit. So like, it's really not that much better. You could say it just has some something to cleanse the palate to make it, a little bit different. But going back to Galaxian is really tough. In fact, I used to play, actually the game that got me into shmups was Galaxian, believe it or not. I remember being really bored during a summer, and I had the Microsoft Arcade Classics collection on my Windows 95 computer. And it had a bunch of titles. It had Pole Position, Dig Dug, which I freaking love Dig Dug, Galaga, Asteroids, and I think that's and Galaxian, and I think that's it. And there might have been Centipede on that one as well, but I really love every game on that, but I played a lot of Galaxian, and so much so that I really got into it and into the scoring of it. And then I really hadn't gotten into playing a lot of Galaga because of that, and it was less available at the time. Now I've played Galaga so much that I when I go back to Galaxian, I just find it so fucking slow. One of the things that, like, it behaves very similarly to Space Invaders, which I actually still really like Space Invaders. I could go back to the original Space Invaders and still play a lot of, but something about Galaxian makes it feel even more sluggish than Space Invaders. like Space Invaders, you can only have one shot on screen at a time. So if you
Yeah,
miss,
that's
you
tough. You
you
get
have
punished real hard.
you have to wait until it leaves the screen before you could shoot again.
And if you're late in the level where the aliens are coming down fast, you feel that.
And I think that's really what it comes down to is um Space Invaders has like a rhythm component to it. So you are, first of all, you're very much pressured to shoot all the aliens before they get all the way down. But and they get faster as there are less of them, as you whittle them down. Whereas Galaxian, that doesn't happen, but they dive bomb you a lot, and they don't travel down like that. So I feel like the rhythm component helps you deal with the fact that you only have one shot per screen, and it feels a lot faster than Galaxian. So, moral of the story is it's just not snappy. It's not as good as Space Invaders, which preceded it, and Galaga, which preceded it itself. So, or came out after, succeeded it, I should say. So I have to say that one. That one's my next choice, I think. Do you have another one?
Uh, I don't know. I'm trying to think like of how like Final Fantasy has evolved, like the old
Oh,
style
geez, yeah.
turn-based combat, like Final Fantasy 1 where you attack an area of the screen, like if two characters attack the same enemy and the first character kills the enemy, the second character will attack where the enemy used to be, and so you just waste a turn, and you know well in advance that you're wasting that turn. And it's just really annoying.
Yeah,
Little things like that are frustrating.
you know what's funny about that is even games before that Final Fantasy was based off of, like Ultima and Wizardry,
Yeah.
and other games like that, the Western games that inspired that, didn't even have that problem. So it's a uniquely Final Fantasy One problem.
Was also this, my next set of examples is a little tough because the internet exists, but I would say games where you need like the manual to advance, possibly for anti-piracy measures and possibly just for lore stuff.
Yeah, a
But
lot
with
of
the
LucasArts games before they were ported to
Sierra,
a lot of Sierra games too. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah. So like, I mean, now we have the internet, so it really doesn't matter. But if you lost your manual or whatever, like, oh, too bad. I was trying to think of something else that fell somewhat into that line too. Oh yeah, like I was gonna say like the Kingsfield games, those that control style did not age well at all. But like they're
Yeah.
arguably more playable now than they were at the date of release because the internet exists.
Yeah,
Without
yeah.
a guy, those games are like, why am I bothering? But with them, it's like, oh, okay, I can make sense of this. But the controls like are, oh man, like it's excusable for the PS1 games, but Eternal Ring on PS2 still does not use the right stick to control the camera. You use like L2 and R2
Yeah,
to
that was
look up and down.
going to be my next choice is any 3D game that doesn't use dual sticks.
Yeah.
Like, and that's really a big shame once you get to like the Dreamcast era,
Yeah.
because that's right before like the Dreamcast didn't have a second analog stick, and woefully so. Like a lot of the games from the Dreamcast that uh, people don't look fondly back on, mostly have that problem of camera control.
Yeah.
Like with PS1 games, they really dealt with it pretty elegantly. They had the shoulder button, so they tried their best. Like if you try going back to Mega Man Legends, it's a little tough, but
Yeah.
you get used to it. You get used to
well,
using the
even in
shoulder
Kingsfield,
buttons.
like I said, L2 and R2 look up and down. L1 and R1 strafe left and right. Like so, like it's janky, but you can make it work.
Yeah, a lot of Dreamcast games, like going back to the original Shenmue, is a little tough on the Dreamcast.
Yeah, even on PS4, like you can learn, but it feels a little weird.
Yeah, yeah.
Actually, one thing about the PS4 that really does bug me, this bugs me quite a bit, that they didn't compensate for this, is that when you learn a new move, the game hints at what the move would be. like you take your stance, you step toward the enemy, and you strike out with your fist. So it's like, oh, okay, toward punch. Like, I get it. But the VMU would just tell you what the input is. And the PS4 doesn't
have any way of displaying it, huh?
Yeah, they didn't compensate for that, so it's pretty frustrating.
Yeah, you have to look up a guide for all the moves.
Yeah,
sure.
when the game's telling you, it's like it's annoying.
Yeah. Like a lot of the games from that era, you go back to like Illbleed or Blue Stinger or like a lot of games that had janky camera control. It's all going to be like that. The Ring for Dreamcast.
Terror's Realm with this like one music track.
I mean, I shouldn't be talking about The Ring because it was always bad. It was bad even back then.
Yeah.
But thankfully, like a lot of the Dreamcast classics, like are
like Carrier.
That's a Jalico classic.
Oh, is it?
It's a Jalico game, man.
Hello.
But a lot of the classics on that system, a lot of the really well revered games were arcade games that didn't have camera control to begin with. And
like Soul Calibur. Was Calibur
Soul
an
Calibur.
arcade game?
Soul Calibur was an arcade game, and then it was.
I know Soul Edge was, but that was ported to the PS1 instead. Still no camera.
Yeah, it's in the grand tradition of Namco actually improving the game when they made it to console. So they did that with all of the Tekken games. Their arcade versions are actually inferior to
and Time Crisis 3 especially.
Yeah. They really improved them when they came to console. Like Tekken 1 through 3 are way better on the PlayStation than its original. And that's still going on with some games like Dead or Alive. Like Dead or Alive 5 was actually much better on PS4.
Well, there's like a million DLC. Like you weren't getting that in the arcade.
It wasn't even that. It was the graphics. Like as simple as that.
When are they going to port Time Crisis 5, by the way? I want that super bad. I don't even know how they would with like the pedals. I guess the buttons do it.
They could use the Move controllers. I mean, they're compatible with PS4.
Yeah, but like, do they have buttons on them where you can like?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Bring Time Crisis 5, please, Namco.
They can do it. They can do it if they wanted to.
I want the incredibly stupid thing where the bad guy fires 6 bullets at you, and you have to respond by firing 6 bullets at his midair bullets. It's the dumbest shit on earth, and I love it.
I actually really like Time Crisis 5. I thought it was great.
Time Crisis is great. It's fucking stupid, which is why I like it.
Yeah, I like them all.
I still have to play 4.
Actually, Crisis Zone had a much better PS2 release than the PS.
Yeah, I have that. I haven't played that either.
Than the arcade. But anyway, moving on from that, there's a lot of Atari games are really hard to go back to. And this is from somebody who loves games from that era. Like I love arcade games from that era. Playing like the early 80s, late 70s arcade games, I still love a ton of those. Like I said, I actually really like the original Space Invaders still right now. I still think it's a great game, especially when I have my All Rush mixtape and a bottle of Shasta. But
I get it. You should shoot where they're going to be.
My brother was always got the last one for me though.
Oh yeah.
But console the Widow Pack.
You have the red card.
But going back to playing like any of the games that are like that try to be complicated on Atari are really difficult to play. Like E.T., Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Well, the thing with E.T. is, from what I've heard, if you have the manual and you know what you're actually supposed to do, the game is way more playable than people let on. It's just that if you have like an emulator and you're like, I want to try playing E.T., you don't know what the fuck you're doing. That's why people hated the game, because they didn't know what to do.
Well, that was part of the problem, and the other part is that it's very slow.
Yes, it is.
And that it's a very sluggish game. But anyway, but you can go back to something like Yar's Revenge. Yar's Revenge is a very good game. I have a hard time going back to the original Pitfall, but Pitfall 2 is a lot better. I like Pitfall 2 quite a bit, but Pitfall is one of those games that everybody like points to as like being a tentpole game.
Oh, actually, speaking of Sierra games, like backpedaling way back to Sierra games, needing to know what the author of the game was thinking to pass a puzzle.
Oh, jeez.
Because there are some leaps in logic and see it. Like, throw a horse bridle on the snake that's trying to bite you? Who the fuck would think that? Like, the thing with Sierra games is a lot of the way you beat those games is to click everything in your inventory on whatever your problem is and see what works.
Yeah.
And that's not fun, Like, there is a sense of discovery when you finally click, but, like, that's not really figuring it out, is it?
No, you're just playing multiple choice until you win.
Yeah.
And that's a shame, because you should have that aha moment of, hey, I figured something out.
I drew the conclusion, yeah. Like I figured this out instead of I had the item in my inventory and I eventually got to that one in my process of elimination.
That's why the LucasArts games from that era are way better. Like, you go back to those and they're very playable nowadays.
And they also do not put you in unwinnable states, because you could easily fuck yourself with Sierra games.
I haven't gone back and played any of the Sierra games because I know how hard they are.
I use guides. I grew up with them. I didn't touch like almost any LucasArts game back in the day just by coincidence. I played Grim Fandango in college and I loved that, but like I was more of a Sierra guy. But like, wow, can you just ruin your whole save file if you save at the wrong time easily?
Yeah, that's infuriating. The LucasArts games were made because they thought that those games were bullshit.
Yeah, like the thing with Sierra is like if you play the way the authors meant it to be played, then you're gonna have a grand old time. But like if you don't, and you won't, then you could get like the biggest problem for me is King's Quest 2 by a lot, which is actually my first King's Quest game and my first Sierra game, and I love it. But there's this bridge, and if you cross the bridge, there's a door, like just standing there. There's nothing behind the door. It's just like there's just a door there. It's kind of like has this weird feel to it, and you're supposed to go looking all around the land to find the key to open the door, and when you do, there's another door behind it, and you need to find out what to do about that door. But when you open the first door, like parts of the regular land, like a plot flag triggers, so you can find the stuff needed for the next door. So like you can't just do the whole game at once and be like 1 door, 2 door, 3 door. So you have to go back and forth, which is fine. The problem is, and I don't think anything tells you this, is you can only cross the bridge exactly as many times as you need to. So if you get toward the end of the game and you've like gone back to the bridge, shit, I forgot what I had to do, and you go back, eventually a hole just opens in the bridge and it breaks and you die, and like you have no way of knowing that would happen.
So annoying.
Like that's infuriating.
I have a couple NES games that I can think of as well. Castlevania 2. Even back then it was difficult, but like I think people put up with it.
Well, what drives me crazy about Castlevania 2, I know like that was like the first video game nerd video, and he's like, how would you figure out the tornado and shit? But like, what really bothers me is that some of the townsfolk just lie to you.
Yeah, and they did in the original Japanese too.
Like, I know that in real life, like, not everybody necessarally tells the truth all the time.
I'm not
like,
playing a game in real life.
Yeah, like, how do I solve the puzzle? Well, you gotta do this, and they're just lying. Like, whoa. Like, how would you know that?
That's infuriating. Mega Man 1 is infuriating.
The funny thing is, if you have the weaknesses in Mega Man 1, it's not like instead of doing 1 or 2 damage to the boss's health bar, you do like 4 or 5 damage. You like 3-shot the bosses if you have their weakness. It's like insane.
Well, that's not what I'm talking about. There are certain points in that game that if you run out of the weapon power,
just give up.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And you could easily do that if you die in the middle of it. In the middle of whatever you're doing, so you don't refill on your weapon power from what you had. So
actually, that reminds me, going back to even the Resident Evil games.
There's no save function either, by the way.
Yep. But going back to the Resident Evil games, if you run out of the good ammo, good luck.
Yeah.
And what if you saved in an area where there's not an easily accessible supply crate or
You're
knife
done.
or something?
Yeah.
Too bad. Like if you're at the final boss and you saved past some point of no return. I don't think Resident Evil really has a point of no return, to be fair. But like, you have a couple bullets and no knife. Like, figure it out. I don't know.
Metroid 1. It's near unplayable nowadays.
Well, yeah. Well, didn't you like require that Nintendo Power issue to make the game playable?
You either need a guide or you need to draw out a map in graphic paper. I mean,
to be fair, that was more the style of the time. It just felt weird on a home console, but this was an era where you might actually draw a map out. Like, that was what you were kind of supposed to do in King's Quest 6 in the Catacombs, or especially King's Quest 5. Did you ever see
any
the
text
maze?
adventure. Text adventures you're really supposed to...
Well, you absolutely must. But did you ever see the maze in King's Quest 5?
No, but I'm sure it's insane.
The funny thing is, the maze itself is not as daunting as you'd think if you look at a map. It's like, oh, that's all it was? But the problem with the maze is that you always face away from the screen. Like, you're looking forward. So, like I'm going to leave the screen on the right side, and now you're looking forward. So you have to remember what direction you're facing. So, like, it's very difficult. King's Quest 6, the maze was tricky, but it was 2D. If you leave on the left side, you start the next screen on the right side facing left. But in King's Quest 5, you are facing forward every time. It's brutal.
You know
so
what that
you might
reminds
enter
me
the
of?
same tile a couple times or different directions and think it's a different place.
You know what that reminds me of? The Friday the 13th game for NES is like...
Oh, if you use a map constantly, you can make sense of it, but like
yeah,
you wouldn't.
But
it's
ridiculous.
Not intuitive.
It's ridiculous. Yeah, it all relies on like a certain perspective.
By the way, speaking of having to do that, I think I saw someone, maybe it was even James Rolfe again, who like taped the map to the screen or like the TV screen or something. I remember there's a thing in Yakuza 2, not the later games where you get more of an aimer, but like. I don't know if it was Yakuza 2, but it was one of the Yakuza games where No, it wasn't 2, it was later. But there's one of the Yakuza baseball minigames where you needed to aim the ball at particular locations. Because in the really old games, it's hit the ball when it comes to you, and either you home run or you don't. But in some later Yakuza games, they advanced the mechanics a little bit, where it's like, can you play bingo and hit, like, this set of 3x3 square, stuff like that. They made it a little more interesting. But the thing is, they never put like a dot where you're swinging the bat, or where the aimer would be on the screen. So like, I've seen a GameFAQs guide that says take like a piece of tape, put it on your TV screen where you're like aiming, and then just manipulate it that way. It's such a pain in the ass. Like, I really should not have to do that.
Wow.
For a PS3 game, get out of here.
Yeah, most PS3 games, by the time you get to PS2, games stop being start being more timeless. I feel
so
like.
Many first-person shooters give you a little crosshair or something. This baseball game didn't do that, so it's like it's way harder than it should be, and it's not even really that hard. But without the crosshair, like, everything changes.
Wow. That's just nutty. I have no explanation for that. That's pretty crazy.
Just like, kind of feel out where you're aiming. Like, I'd rather not. I'd rather know where I'm aiming in this video game.
Yeah. There's also a lot of PC games that really didn't age well either. Like, try going back to. I'm gonna go ahead and say it. Go back to Morrowind or even Oblivion. And therefore anything before that,
yeah,
they're near unplayable. I know there are a lot of people that say like how awesome Morrowind was back in the day, but you go back and you play it now, I bet you will have a very difficult time playing that game. I'm sure it was very expansive and you could do a lot of things in it, but it's so inconvenient to play. I don't think there's any fast travel in that game at all.
Oof.
Oblivion does, but it kind of feels like it was just getting going to where it needed to be, and the one after that is the one that you're supposed to be playing. with a dragon.
Skyrim.
Skyrim. I'm sorry, Skyrim. Yeah.
11, 11, 11.
11, 11.
I mean, you know what that is?
Was that the release date?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, or 9999 Dreamcast.
Oh.
But I have found that there are certain things that have really aged well. Like I could go back to I've been playing Doom lately, and Doom is great.
Doom holds up. Yeah.
And I've actually been playing Dark Forces, and it's really good too. I really love Dark Forces. In fact, I think that the style of level composition is much different in Dark Forces to the fact that it's to the effect that like they're not similar games in that regard.
Yeah.
They're similar in that they're first person shooters from a similar era, but Dark Forces all has like every single level's a little bit different in its approach, and they're not made to be battle arenas. A lot of them are meant to be explored. Whereas Doom games have an exploratory element. Of course, you have the secrets and stuff.
Well, you're exploring for key cards, but like with Dark Forces, it feels like it's supposed to be like a place in the Star Wars universe.
Yeah, and there's an actual.
This is their crew quarters, whereas Doom, like, not really.
There's an actual
bit,
goal
really.
to what you're trying to do, other than kill all the things and exit.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, I was gonna point that out actually because I was playing Dark Forces earlier today. I was like, man, this is good.
Have you played Dark Forces 2?
No, I've actually never played Dark Forces 2.
Like, Dark Forces 2 is like the quintessential example. Well, it's really not, because not a lot of people have played Dark Forces at this point, but like, Dark Forces 2 is a classic example of a sequel that just blows its predecessor way out of the water.
I really like Dark Forces 1.
Worlds better. Dark Forces 1 is still a good game, but Dark Forces 2 is so good. You gotta play that.
I'm just so nostalgic for Dark Forces 1 though. Like
well, that's kind of my thing. I'm nostalgic for 2 because I played it in like middle school, but like you have got to play 2. It's so good. Like all of a sudden, did Dark Forces 1 have voice acting? I forgot.
Oh yeah, it sure did. Yep.
Okay, so 2 is voice acting. The graphics
it also has
an
iMuse music generator in it. The iMuse, I don't know whether you knew this or not, but like the second Monkey Island game has this like iMuse system. So like depending on what you're doing in the game, the music is dynamic.
Oh, Deus Ex had that, yeah.
So if you decide to start moving to another part of the map, it will like start changing the music, but it will do it gradually and naturally. Dark Forces has that where you're going through the level and it's just playing like MIDI Star Wars music, but then if you start getting into a battle, it'll amp up into the Star Wars music for battling.
Dark Forces 2 has like really like way better graphics, a lot of verticality to its levels, interesting puzzles that feel like things you could do in the real world, civilians you can kill, which you shouldn't, but you can go light or dark depending on whether you do that. You can get light and dark force powers and 2 different endings.
Has lightsaber battles, which
got lightsaber battles. Yeah. First person lightsaber battles feels a little janky by today's standards, but it was really cool at the time.
And force powers too, which Dark Forces did not have.
You're learning force powers. I said 2 endings already. It has like actual like Star Wars music in it. It has FMV cutscenes with like live actors, which I thought was the coolest thing at the time. I was like, oh, real life. Also, what was the other thing? Oh yeah, one thing that I like never saw any other game do is when you have a boss fight against a Force user, you have like this previous Jedi, like it just has the camera, like before the level starts, the camera is just panning around a third-person depiction of the boss. It's just panning around them in a circle, and the boss, like, and then the narrator describes them, like, this guy, oh man, don't want to mess with him, he's super badass and this and that. Like before the fight starts, it really makes it feel like, oh, this is gonna be something. Like it's super interesting.
Another one. Far Cry 2 has not aged well. That was a game that everybody loved when it came out. It was like a big thing. But nowadays, like if you go back to it, like you constantly are like a ticking time bomb in that game because you have to stave off malaria by finding
Oh no.
medication. So like you don't have a moment's peace in trying.
That's like Galarians. The entire game is like secretly on a timer.
Yeah. Who wants that? I mean, especially when you're exploring and stuff like that. You know, it's.
Yeah.
I mean, you could put up with it with things like like Majora's Mask or whatever.
Oh,
but
you know what my favorite part of Far Cry 2 was, by the way? You know how in Far Cry 3 when you heal yourself, you heal like what your injury was?
Sure.
Like you put a bandage on your burn
I know what you're
wounds,
gonna mention
or like
here.
unbreak your fingers.
Yeah.
With Far Cry 2, those healing animations are random. So I saw the funniest video ever. You're in Africa, so the video's called Deadly Africanized Water, because like when you're underwater, like any game ever, when you start running out of oxygen, you take health damage. So this person was just staying underwater and waiting till his health got low and then healing. So he's just unbreaking his fingers. He's pulling a rod out of his chest. Wow, this is some tough water.
Yeah,
it's like the funniest thing.
Not only that, but they won't let you to do that in the later Far Cry games, like for like water damage or
oxygen is oxygen.
Yeah,
you're
exactly.
Drown,
exactly.
But in Far Cry 2, it's just random animations, so it's so funny to see you unbreaking your fingers because of the damage you took from being underwater too long. It's like, what?
Stupid.
It's a riot.
It's so stupid. That's really funny.
Yeah.
I'll also go back and say like the original Mortal Kombat's really hard for me to play these days.
It's very slow.
That game hasn't aged well for me at all. A lot of people from that era really like Mortal Kombat 2. I would go as far as to say that I probably wouldn't like any Mortal Kombat before the modern era Mortal Kombat.
I have nostalgia for 3, but I haven't played it in a while. What was interesting about 3 is that...
I mean, I like watching it because it's nutty.
Yeah, but Mortal Kombat 2 is a very defensive game. In
Yeah.
3, you have the run button. So you're like, your opponent can't just stay back and spam fireballs. You could just go like, "Rah!" Just run right up to them and scare the hell out of them.
Yeah. Oh, man, there's just a lot, but I think we went over a lot of them here. Do you have any like final ones that you wanted to mention before we moved on to fan stuff?
I'm kind of tapped out.
Yeah, me too. All right.
So for fan stuff, we have A Living Corpse left a bunch of comments.
Great.
So we have, imagine trying to explain the Xbox naming convention to a non-gamer wanting to buy games. You know, grandma's trying to buy some games, for their gamer relative. Like think about the marketing when naming your system.
It's so stupid.
Also, just an afterthought, I'm pissed I never got to play Ghost in the Shell 2. Also, 8K gaming? I'm still trying to find a capture card that does 4K 120 FPS. Fun fact, Sony is working on crystal LED TVs, like micro LED, that might be able to display 10K. Just for reference, IMAX is 12K, and Samsung is working on QNED TVs, like nano LED, so who knows what resolution that can get.
Yeah, the funny thing about that is, there is an upper limit to resolution. Like, eventually, it's not going to matter. It's going to be so big that no matter how big you blow it up, it's going to look the same to us.
Yeah,
exactly. I tried explaining to my brother who thought it was pretty ridiculous that I was buying Blu-rays of black and white movies. I was like, actually, this is a great idea. And he's just like, well, what are you getting out of it? I mean, those movies were made in the 20s.
But Goldfinger was like filmed on film. I remember seeing Goldfinger.
That's what I was gonna say. Yeah. Like film is like around like just as he was explaining in the or they were explaining. I don't know if living courses which gender they are, but like it only goes up to about 12K. That's where film taps out. So like after that, you're not going to notice the difference that no matter how big it's blown up, that's it. Even that much resolution won't mean much to us at home because our TVs aren't as big as a wall.
Yeah, we don't have jumbotrons.
Exactly. So like 4K is the upper limit of we don't need 8K at home.
You need like an entire wall to be a screen.
Exactly. Exactly. So
This is my ultra movie theater gaming room.
it's like the megapixels in cameras. Like, who gives a shit now? Like, nobody gives a shit. Like,
but what I was just gonna say though is what you were mentioning is that old movies were filmed with film, but like that would equate to HD by today's standards. Like I was gonna say, I remember seeing Goldfinger on some HD channel, and it looked clear. I was like, what? Like, isn't this movie like from the 60s? But it still looked like it was filmed in HD because it kind of was.
Yeah, I was buying Metropolis on Blu-ray, and my brother's like, "Why are you bothering?" And I was just like, first of all, they added like 20 minutes to they found a cut that was like longer than any cut they had ever seen before, so that's significant, and it looks more like it did back when it came out than ever.
Yep. Also, Living Corpse has a few more comments. Apparently, EA spoiled the ending of Jedi Fallen Order in commercials. Like, maybe you don't know it's a spoiler, but it's there, I guess. So 2 steps forward, 8 steps back. I hate when trailers do that. Link and Samus. This I did know. Link and Samus were once planned for a Marvel Ultimate Alliance game. Yeah. Too bad Activision was showing them off to Nintendo on the PS2 build of the game.
Yeah.
I understand they were pressed for time, but never use the competition when trying to impress someone to give you time and funding. Yeah.
Especially somebody from another culture that has a lot of pride in their product. I mean, you know, the Sony people, like the Microsoft people, probably wouldn't have taken the PS2 one to be such a bad, as bad as Nintendo took it. Let's just put it that way. Yeah.
And again, this was a callback to a question I had last week. I wasn't 100% sure on this. Living Corpse says, Resident Evil 3 introduced freeze rounds for the grenade launcher, and they were better than Magnum rounds. Initial impact does more damage than Magnum rounds. It does continuous damage. It flinches Nemesis, giving you more time, and slows down his walking speed again, buying you more time. The one downside is the dodge mechanic was given to Nemesis as well, so he could dodge your grenade rounds. It's fucking crazy. Wow. He was hoping the remake keeps them.
Yeah.
And then just 2 more comments. I hope they keep the brain suckers in. Yeah, fuck those things. With technical limitations, it could be hard to make out details on some of the monsters, but a giant 2-headed mutant flea? Imagine that in the RE engine. Yeah. It has to be between them and the other fleas. The Drain Demos, I remember those. Cut out the Drain Demos and keep the brain suckers. And then final comments.
I can't wait until the Dino Crisis 3 remake.
Yeah, my favorite. Zombies being bullet sponges in the remake explains to me how Raccoon City got overrun, because in the old games, it was just the numbers that overwhelmed the cops. Yeah, that makes sense.
Sure.
And now we have 3 more comments, one from Dragon Ace.
Hey!
I had a lot of fun, and this is why I'm Dragon Ace in the vid, but most of my usernames other places are Dragon's Dusk. There's a reason behind the differences, lol. I don't know what the different reason is, actually.
Yeah, she didn't tell us.
Yeah, Dracologist says, propaganda comics. Good thing we don't see that sort of thing nowadays. Oh, wait. No, this wasn't Dracologist said this. And then it says, I think debuffing is kind of a balance. Darkest Dungeon does it well. Also, the White Dragon Ward in Lunar breaks boss monster attacks, so...
I have to take your word for that. I haven't played Lunar yet.
And then Fakafon for Real says, you know what? I think my favorite RE game, apart from RE5, is original RE1. Because you die so fast in that game, but so does the enemy. So no one's super powerful, except the enemies that need to be, like the Tyrant.
Or that bald zombie, for some reason, at the very beginning of the game, takes a ton of shots.
That is true, but if you run away from him and come back, he... like reverse to normal.
Oh, okay.
He's only overpowered like when he first appears immediately. So like
that's interesting.
It's a little weird, yeah. In the RE2 remake, the protagonists die fast, zombies take forever. Then they get back up and it's this whole process. It's super cool and neat. It definitely keeps you on the edge at all times because killing enemies isn't a simple matter anymore. Downside is sometimes I don't feel like battling again and again and again and again. Relieving tension is also a big part of games, I feel. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can buy that.
I agree.
When you finally earn like a clean room, I've cleared out the hallway. And then the question, Living Corpse again, actually. What is the most insane mental gymnastics you've personally experienced? I've been ghosted over movies on 2 separate occasions, 3 or 4 years apart, once by a friend at the time, and the other by a family member. I would say, be honest and just say no when I asked them. But the kicker is I didn't ask them, because I figured they had no interest in the films in question. They asked me to take them. So they asked to be taken to the movies they had no interest in seeing, just to no contact, because I was their ride. And now normally the story would end here, but lo and behold, common sense isn't common. This year, when asked on a forum who I saw a recent movie with, I just said I went by myself. And a guy said, that'd be like me divorcing my wife and leaving my kids because they don't like the same thing as me. I thought I had a stroke when I don't fucking know. I thought I had a stroke when I first read that. How he made the leap from seeing a movie by herself to divorce is beyond me.
Yeah, seriously.
I didn't know what to say other than, what the actual fuck? A girl said, can't you ignore them when you take them to see the movie? What? Better question, why would I bring them to see a movie they don't like and ruin my experience? Of course I didn't say that. At the time, I could only think to respond again with, again, what the actual fuck?
Yeah, seriously, just going to the movies by yourself sometimes is an option.
I really don't like doing that, but I've done that I think twice.
I've done it. I don't mind.
I've done it. I just don't like doing that. Although I actually did do it with Rise of Skywalker, it wasn't so bad. But I usually like going with friends if I can, which is actually why I see movies so infrequently because I like to go with people.
Sure.
And then the last bit of this question mark is later Carter saying I have an ego because I don't want to play games with people who don't respect me. Give me a break. Yeah, that's a lot of mental leaps. Personally experienced though, I don't know. I can only really think conceptually, like if you're having a debate, but just because the person wants to be contrarian, they end up arguing against their initial point because they want to argue against you. So like if you ever find a point where you would agree with them, all of a sudden you're wrong now, which means their original point was wrong because they're just saying no. But I don't have any insane situations. Like how the fuck did we get to this point? Like with people I've interacted with in real life, I don't think.
I had one when I was. This kind of thing happens a lot when you're trying to date too, because people don't really want to say what they actually mean, and they're also kind of wishy-washy. So like, I had this one girl that like kept talking to me, and then we would get to the point where I would ask her out on a date, she would agree, and then she would make up an excuse like the day before and not go, and I'm like, okay, well, let's make another date. And then, she would just keep pushing it off, and then it eventually hit that like she was like used a family illness as like an excuse to get out of the date and then never talk to me again. Like, well, I like, just say you didn't want to date me. Like, why'd you waste my time? Like, I don't care. Like, I don't, and you're never gonna see me again anyway. So, like,
well, not to mention, not only, I mean, maybe this person didn't know you didn't care, but at the same time, like, that would shut you the fuck up. If they use excuses, you're gonna keep coming back. Like, oh, maybe we can reschedule. And, like, now she has to put up with that.
Yeah, one of the last times we were texting back to each other, she's like, "Oh, what kind of girls do you like?" And I was like, "Usually the kind that like to go on dates with me." and she's just like, "Well,
oh fuck."
Well, fair enough. And then like,
that's fantastic.
I was so fed up.
That's
like,
amazing,
in order for me
dude.
to say something like that and not give a shit
you are
that
not,
I said
you are not that guy. You must have been fucking pissed.
No, I was just so goddamn frustrated. I didn't care whether I went on anything with her. I don't
think I've ever heard you like be like that, like, ever.
No, I'm not. This was just like over the course of a month where she just kept ghosting me,
That's incredible.
Yeah, and I was just like fuck off. Like,
you know what that reminds me of? This is a weird thing to bring up, but like, it's an old Monty Python sketch that I'd never seen before. I have not seen all of Monty Python. Sure. It's a freaking 1970s show.
Who would?
Of course my dad saw a lot of it.
Yeah.
So like he thought it was all cute when I would catch it on TV. Sometimes he'd be like, "Yo, there's this show Monty Python." It's like, I know, but there was this one sketch where John Cleese went into a cheese shop. He was looking to buy cheese, and the guy's like, "Oh well, what would you like?" And he's like, "Do you have this particular kind of cheese? No. Do you have this kind of cheese? No. This kind of cheese? No." And it like it keeps going on. Like, he keeps asking, the other guy keeps saying no, and it gets to a point where he's like, "Why do people like your shop anyway?" And he's like, "Well, it's very clean, sir. It's immaculately clean." And John Cleese replies, "Well, it's certainly not contaminated with cheese." It's like amazing. That sketch gets progressively funnier, by the way. It's pretty fantastic. There comes a point where the shopkeeper's like, "Do you want me to just tell you what kind of cheese I have? No, I'd rather guess. It's like, really? It just keeps
You
going.
finally get an out for the problem, and he doesn't take it.
It's so funny.
Yeah, that's good comedy right there.
Yeah. It's like, come on, it's been like a minute. Just do it.
But you know me, I'm usually diplomatic in most situations because like I just want to get along in the end with whatever situation I am and then get out of it. But like I was that fed up with this girl. Like it was like
what kind of girl do you like? Maybe I would know if I ever saw her.
Exactly.
Like, what do you want? Like, as far as I know, you're just a voice on my phone.
Yeah. So it was just like, this is stupid. So yeah, that's gonna be my choice. I mean, I've had many, all kinds of interactions on Twitter that are I've kinds probably, of mental gymnastics.
Twitter's a
place for that.
But like, I mean, honestly, I've probably had something, but like, I can't think of any time where I've just been super mad that somebody's just like jumping in all sorts of different directions, like in the same conversation, like unless it's like I was saying earlier, like a debate or something. Like I don't know if I've had that like in the classroom or anything where some student was just pissing me off with like, how did you get to this point? I don't know. Like, I don't know if I really have any warped delusions with people I've interacted with personally. So like I don't really have a good answer for this, I'm afraid. I probably actually do, just like I can't think of it, which is frustrating. But like, I don't know. I don't usually. But I don't even know if this counts really. But like, I've told you this before personally, but this is back when I used to work as a cashier. I just worked at a hardware store.
Sure.
And they like you had to, if you ever had to call out of work, you had to do it like 30 months, 30 days in advance. Which is already bullshit, by the way, because you get your schedule 2 weeks in advance. Go fuck yourself. But you had to do that. There was one time where I had taken a weekend off because I was going to go to a convention, Autocon. This is way back in the day.
Yeah, I remember this time. Yeah.
And usually they give it to me because like I never request off.
Sure.
And it's like it's one weekend, but for whatever reason I was scheduled that weekend. And like the funny thing is, like I'm going.
Yeah.
Like
I paid to go.
I'm a cashier. I'm very replaceable. And also I gave you 30 days notice. Go fuck yourself. So I talked to my immediate supervisor. And I was like, I see that I'm scheduled here, even though I requested off, and I wasn't denied. And no news is good news. So he was like, oh, and he was like hemming and hawing, like, I don't know if we're going to be able to do this or that. Well, we'll have to see. Maybe check with the manager. And I'm like, okay. So that's as far as I'll take my mental gymnastics. But the end of the story is I went to like a manager in the store, and she was just kind of like chilling at the front desk looking over something or other. And I was like, hey, excuse me, I have this weekend I requested off and I'm scheduled on it, but I wanted it off and it should be off. And she had like a little schedule planner in front of her, and she was like, oh, okay, let me check the thing. Like, what days did you say? And I was like, these 3 days. And she was like, okay, X. Like, all right, you're good. Like, oh, that was it? All right. Well, bye. Thank you.
I've had friends that were that same thing has happened to them, but like it was the opposite. They were like, well, you're gonna have to stay, and they were like, okay, well, I'm quitting. Bye. Like,
that was the thing. Like, I'm gonna be out of state. Like, when I request off, I'm not requesting off. I'm telling you, I'm gonna be 2.5 hours away. Come get me. Like,
I'm not flaking. I can't come to work.
I mean, I can, but I fucking won't. You had your warning. Like, go fuck yourself. Give me a weekend off every once in a while. Maybe I'll reconsider. Actually, no, I wouldn't. I paid for this like 3 months ago.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I don't even know if that really counts as mental gymnastics. Maybe just the concept of having to request off a month in advance when they only give you your schedule 2 weeks, which is fucking horseshit. Do you know how many times I've had friends go, hey, can you hang out with us in like a week or a week and a half? That's a lot of notice. And I'm like, well, no, like I have my schedule 2 weeks in advance, so no. Like, it's fucking infuriating. So when I tell you I'm not going to be here a month in advance, you fucking don't schedule me. I'm not like a manager. I'm a cashier. There's 100 of me. Pick somebody else.
Jeez.
So again, I don't know if that's mental gymnastics, but that's I don't know. It's the best I got right now.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we did well with that. I really want to thank everybody who contributed this week.
Yeah,
This
comments for days.
yeah. Living Corpse, thank you. Keep it up. We love everything you did here, and our friends here, Dracologist and Facaphon and even
Dragon Ace.
Dragon Ace here. We have a lot of participation here. I really want to thank everybody here. Well, that is the show for this week. We want to thank our fans who contributed questions. Please keep us supplied with awesome topics by submitting questions of your own on the YouTube and SoundCloud pages. While there, please give us thumbs ups, likes, and 5-star ratings on iTunes. It helps promote and spread awareness of the show, and any bit of encouragement helps keep the show going. You can also catch us on Tuesdays for our sister podcast, Reactive Consciousness, the in-depth look at this week in our lives. Finally, you can friend me as vysethebold on pretty much everything.
And you can follow me on my YouTube channel, Lotus Prince. You can hit me up on Twitter at Lotus Prince. And finally, if you are interested in seeing my videos early, getting in on exclusive live streams, selecting upcoming games for me to Let's Play, or get involved in conversations with me and other patrons on Discord, then perhaps consider swinging by my Patreon account, which can be found at patreon.com/LotusPrince.
All right, thanks a lot, everybody. We'll catch you again on Tuesday for another episode of Recon. Catch you then.
Until next time, everyone.
Bye.